Chapter 16. Somehow, when he'd asked the question, Blaine hadn't put the coming Sunday together with Sunday, the 14th, moving day. When Eve suggested they all go to church before showing up to move Jeff and Lisa, Blaine hadn't had the heart to decline. And so, on Sunday morning, the three of them, Melody, Dylan, and he, pulled up at St. Mark's looking like three deer caught in headlights. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Melody asked, readjusting the scoop-necked blouse that was more scooped because there wasn't as much of her as when she'd obviously bought it. Twice he'd seen her pull hair out of her head, and he knew it was only a matter of time as to when he would ask now. But he would ask. They would talk. He knew that with no doubt. "It'll be fine," he said with far more solidity than he felt. When they parked, he got out and ran around to get her. After a moment of readjusting, the three of them headed for the stairs. "I feel out of place," she said, leaning into him. "And I don't," he whispered back. That made her clutch his hand even harder. They had only barely made it through the doors when he caught sight of Eve waving at them from across the large gathering area. It was a moment more before he recognized AJ standing next to her. No hat and in a suit, he looked radically different. Kind of like the radical difference Blaine had been noticing in a lot of people these days. They walked up, and Blaine offered his hand to a surprised AJ. "AJ?" "Blaine." AJ's gaze went from him to Melody, and there was a swirl of things in that look. "Mel." He started for her hand, but the handshake ended in a short hug. "I'm glad you came." When she stepped back, there was a soft smile on her face as she looked up at Blaine. "Blaine convinced me." And, for the very, very first time, there was almost non-hatred when AJ looked at him. "Shall we?" Eve asked, and the little caravan started for the door. Melody was serious about the feeling out of place thing. She did. Every inch of her did. Everyone else had on expensive clothes and heels she couldn't walk on in her dreams. Nothing about this felt even vaguely familiar, and it was feeling less so by the second. She followed AJ into the bench, and Dylan and Blaine followed her. When she sat, the only thing she could think was, "How in the world did I get here?" That thought was on loop through the first song and the piano music with a lady talking from the front. She snagged on a few words: forgiveness, joy, salvation, but the meaning of the message went way over her head. She fought not to squirm. No wonder she didn't do this. The bench was hard, and the service was getting even longer than she'd expected. As she sat there, she decided if Blaine wanted to do this in the future, he was going to have to do it alone because she wasn't coming back. Another person got up and read some words. It made even less sense, and Melody fought the urge to look at her watch. The missed sleep over the last couple of nights began to encroach on her, and she stifled the yawn. She wondered how much longer the service would be, and she would have asked, but figured that wouldn't go over very well. "Good morning," the main preacher said, stepping to the podium. "Good morning," the crowd responded, and as Melody looked out, she realized how many people there actually were. This wasn't some tiny, insignificant gathering. This was an actual crowd. She sat up straighter, determined to listen, if for no other reason than to be able to carry on a logical conversation later. "What do you need to bring today to the cross?" the preacher asked. "We all have them, those things that need to be brought to the cross. Things that we've been through, things that have happened to us and to those we love that we don't understand. Things we're angry about or hurt over. You may think that looking at the person next to you that they don't have anything to bring to the cross. But you would be wrong, because we all have those things, every single one of us. So what are your things? What things keep you in fear and bondage? What things do you not even want to tell your ceiling at night? What things keep you from experiencing God's love? What thoughts run through you on a daily basis, thoughts of inadequacy maybe, or failure, or fear?" Melody wanted to look over at Blaine. Surely he was as confused by how this preacher could have known what they'd talked about as she was. But she didn't have the chance. Maybe it's your station in life, your job, what you drive, what you wear. Maybe those are the things that chain you to believing you are not worth the Father's love. Or maybe it's something closer to your heart. A wayward child, a marriage that's in trouble, a dream that seems like it will never come true. Look in your heart. What is it that is tearing you apart? What is it that is keeping the wall between you and the love God has for you? The world comes up with 101 of these things to convince us that God could never love us and that we shouldn't even love ourselves. We don't have a nice enough house, a pretty enough lawn, a big enough income. We don't look like the models in the magazines, or we don't lead exciting lives like the people on the screen, big or small. We know these things are gnawing at our souls, but instead of giving them to God, we rush around trying to be everything to everyone, never stopping long enough to consider what we are to God. The words hit closer to the center of her heart with every round. Finally, Melody put her head down, fighting to breathe through them. The Bible talks about God's love for us. Here's what it says. There was a man who found a treasure in a field, and he immediately went and sold everything he owned and bought that field. He went and sold everything he had, and he bought that field. Do you think that man understood the unimaginable value of the treasure he had found? Sure he did. That's why he sold everything. He sold his cars and his house. He sold his clothes and his gym membership. He even sold that gold watch he'd gotten when he retired from the company. He went out and sold everything. Why? Because he had found something that he understood to be of even greater value, something immeasurably better than what he already had. And what is that treasure of immeasurable value that Jesus talks about in this parable? It's Him, of course, Jesus Christ in His full glory and splendor, shining like gold. The one thing that happens when you really find Him is you are willing to give everything else away to hold on to Him. Ah, yes, true. But here's the amazing thing. Jesus was not only speaking about Himself. He was not just speaking of the treasure He is. He was also speaking about the treasure you are. The preacher's words slowed and then stopped. He pointed at the crowd. However, Melody felt as if he was pointing only at her. She couldn't have looked away had she tried. Jesus Christ came one day to your field, and He found in you a priceless treasure. He looked at you and He said, "Here, this is the treasure I am willing to give everything away to possess." And then He did give everything away. He gave His very life to buy your field because of the immense treasure you hold. He took a breath, gathered himself, took a half step backward. And yet we still cling to these things that mean nothing whatsoever. Why? When today, right now, this minute, Jesus is asking you, what do you need to lay at the foot of the cross? What do you need to give to me so you don't have to carry it anymore? What addiction? What fear? What is holding you back from me and my love? Put it down, right here at my feet. Please, put it down and just let me love you. Let me hold you and show you what a treasure I think you are. There was silence for a moment. I invite you to close your eyes and go deep inside. In your heart of hearts, look at Jesus as He holds His hands out to you to receive you in His embrace. In the silence of your heart, look at Jesus and say, "Lord, today I give you those things that I have kept from you. I see now that you and only you bring real, lasting peace. I lay down my thoughts, my fears, my burdens. I lay them at the foot of your cross. I lay my trials and all my dreams that haven't gone the way I'd hoped. God, I give them all to you now. I give you the times I have succeeded and the times I have failed. I give you the life I wanted and the life I am living. Lord, I give them all to you. You who love me beyond measure, who bought me and paid for me with your own blood. Jesus, I relinquish those things that are holding me back from loving you and those that are holding me back from letting you love me today, right now. Amen. Tears dampened Melody's cheeks as she sniffed and said, Amen. Her heart was heavy with all the preacher had said. Peace had felt so very far away for so very long. Was this why? Was it because she hadn't found the treasure hidden in a field? And even more, was it possible that he had been searching for her all this time as well? It was just too overwhelming to get her mind around. As the service continued, she glanced over at Blaine, who looked to be having as much trouble digesting everything as she was. God, she prayed softly, you and I both know that Blaine is a hidden treasure. Please help him see that. And then a whisper of a voice went through her heart, startling her with its clarity. And so are you, Melody. So are you. We'll meet you over at Jeff's, AJ said as they all walked out to the parking lot afterward. Blaine's hand was in Melody's for the simple fact that if it wasn't, he might not have been able to walk at all. She said something to confirm the plan, and together they walked out to her car. The fact that AJ might see her car and start asking questions never even occurred to Blaine. He was much too overcome by the service. When they got in the car, he still sat for longer than it normally took to prepare for a drive. Melody glanced over at him, a question in her eyes, and looking as shell-shocked as he felt. If I didn't know any better, I would think that guy was at the park listening Friday night. He felt the same way, but words still failed. Glancing in the back seat, he gauged his words carefully. You're not going to believe this, but I just read that passage about the hidden treasure this week. Her eyes widened. Did you know they were going to use it today? How could I? I didn't even know we were coming until yesterday. The implications of everything that was happening around them seemed incomprehensible. Blaine fought the shaking of his hand as he started the car and put it into drive. He reached onto the dash for his sunglasses, seeing next to nothing. Could this really be a coincidence? Or could it be something bigger, something more that he was just beginning to tap into, but might never understand? They had all changed from their Sunday clothes to moving clothes, and Melody was busy stuffing pillows into a giant box in the back bedroom when Eve walked in. Eve stood for a long moment, gazing up at the wallpaper ringing the room. After a minute, Melody stopped to look up, trying to see what she was looking at. It's too bad they can't take the teddy bear paper with them, Melody said, because it was just too weird to stand there and say nothing. It's so cute. Yeah, Eve said, and sadness dripped from her voice. She walked over and ran her hand slowly over the wall that was painted in several colors. It looked like it had been sponge painted or something. The stuffing slowed as Melody watched Eve. There was something unsettling about how quiet she was. It was as if she was standing at a gravestone rather than next to the wall of a baby's room. Of course, Melody knew about Eve's past, how she had lost her husband in a terrible accident. But what was bringing this sadness on now? Now, when they really needed to be working, or they would never get finished. Melody picked up the comforter with a teddy bear on it and fanned it out to fold it. Because of its smooth surface, the comforter didn't want to cooperate and stay in the folds she was trying to put in it. No, don't do that. The edges slipped out of their places. Oh, sorry, Eve said, turning, and Melody saw her swipe her fingers under her eyes. Here, let me help. As they folded the comforter, Melody watched Eve. Something was obviously bothering her, but there was no way it was Melody's place to ask. When the comforter was folded, the two of them stuffed it into the box on top of the pillows. It's a good thing they already got most of this, or we'd never make it, Melody said. No kidding. Kudos to the moving crew yesterday. Eve stepped back and sniffed. Melody went over to the closet and opened it, Thankfully, there was only a small shoe left in it. Oops, looks like they forgot something. She swiped it from the floor and held it up. Yeah, that's probably Alex's, Eve said, sounding like she was being strangled. Just throw it in one of the boxes. She stood for one more second. I'm going to go see what the guys are doing. And she left. Not wanting to, Melody gazed after her. Strange. She was acting like this was her own house she was leaving, not just the house of friends she happened to know. With a shrug, Melody set about taping and labeling the box. Be careful with this one, it's dishes, Lisa said as Blaine came back to the kitchen for another load. He didn't even want to think what this would be like if they hadn't had most of it moved already. There was no table in the kitchen, no chairs either, thus they had eaten lunch from bags on the floor. Got it, he said, lifting the box from the floor with ease. He took it outside and put it in the back of AJ's SUV. That's where they were trying to put the breakable stuff. On the way back in, he met up with Melody, hefting a box twice her size. Would you like some help with that? I'll pay you, she said breathlessly. With a smile, he yanked the box up and started to the trailer. This could get interesting. Ha ha. She turned and walked back in the house. Blaine smiled. He loved teasing her. She had such a dry sense of humor, although she caught his jokes. She didn't knock herself out to pretend he was hilarious. He set the box on the trailer. Help, AJ called from the door, and Blaine turned and raced to the porch. The top piece of the mirrored hutch wobbled dangerously until Blaine stabilized it. Picking up one end, he walked backward to the trailer. We need to get this secure. I don't want a lawsuit, Blaine said jokingly. Yeah, you and me both, AJ said. Together, they laid the thing up against one of the rails, and AJ checked it to make sure it was secure. Maybe we should put a blanket around this. I'd hate for it to get scratched. Oh, I saw Jeff put one in their car. Blaine headed for it. Figures Jeff would be moving the blankets and letting us do the heavy stuff. Blaine retrieved the blanket and brought it back over. From what I've seen, he's no dummy. AJ laughed a little and took one end of the blanket. This is true. It's like he knew we couldn't come yesterday, so he plans this little job for today. I think they actually moved quite a bit yesterday. There really isn't much left. Carefully, AJ secured the hutch that now resembled a green ghost to the railing. Well, that's good to know. He dusted his hands off and looked at his watch. It's after 3. It's nearly an hour there, and then we've got to unload. Man, I thought we were doing good. Blaine followed AJ back to the house. They really were going to have to hurry. They had just loaded the last 2 boxes, knickknacks from the kitchen. Lisa, Eve, and Melody were cleaning. Why, Blaine wasn't really sure. It wasn't their problem anymore. But it was like the merry maids had shown up in force. It's a woman thing, Jeff assured the 2 guys. You should have seen how long Lisa cleaned on her apartment after we moved her out. I didn't think she'd ever get finished. Melody was in the back vacuuming. It was the only movable appliance left in the house. Jeff stood, assessing the situation for mere seconds. Tell you what, why don't you all come in our car when you're finished? There's room for the vacuum in the back. That way we can head on and start unloading this stuff. Sounds good, Lisa said as she scrubbed on one spot harder than Blaine had ever done anything in his lifetime. We'll be there in a little while. Kissing his wife, Jeff nodded. Don't clean too much. You know us, Eve said, wiping down the stove one last time. Jeff laughed. That's what I'm afraid of. He smiled at Lisa one more time. Drive careful. You too. The vacuum cleaner was still whirring somewhere in the house. Blaine wanted to have that goodbye moment with Melody. It wasn't until he thought about Dylan that he found his excuse. I'm just going to go tell Mel we're taking off. Don't take too long, Jeff said. Hey, Dylan, want to ride shotgun? I'll let you program the GPS. Sure. At that very second, Blaine knew he was sunk. Trying not to think about it, he hurried back to the bedrooms. He found Melody sucking up a spiderweb in the corner. We're taking off, he verily shouted over the vacuum. She spun like she'd been shot. What? In annoyance, she hit the off button, plunging the room into silence. What? I said we're leaving. He pointed out the door. The girls are staying to finish cleaning, but but if we don't get this stuff unloaded, it's going to be midnight before anybody gets to bed." "Oh." She looked genuinely disturbed. "Don't worry. I'll leave your car. You won't have to ride with them." "Oh," she said again, still not looking very happy about the situation. She raked her fingers across her hair and flicked the hair that came out with her fingers. "What about Dylan?" Blaine swallowed the words. "He's already got shotgun with Jeff. Don't ask." Concern traced through her eyes. "Will you be okay?" He smiled and winked. "I'm always okay." Quickly he kissed her cheek. "I'd better get, or they're going to fire me." "Okay, see ya." And he left her, standing over the vacuum in an empty room. It wasn't the best idea in the world, but the guys really did need his help. Trying not to think about leaving her there like that, he hustled out to the vehicles. Once outside, it took less than nothing to assess the seating arrangement. "Hang on," he said to AJ. "Just let me grab my book." AJ nodded and angled the SUV with a little trailer on the back toward the white car. Thinking it could be the only thing to save his sanity, Blaine grabbed his economics book out. If riding in the SUV got completely unbearable, at least he would have an excuse to do something other than talk. Melody was finished vacuuming. The guys had been gone for quite a while. She checked her watch. Nearly 4:30. They would need to be going soon, too. She started for the kitchen but stopped when she heard them talking. "I know it's stupid," Eve said, and Melody heard the emotion in her voice. "But I about lost it earlier in Alex's room. Remember when AJ and I came over to paint?" "Remember it? I'm surprised the poor house survived." "Yeah, but I just started thinking about how much has changed, about how much is changing, and how fast it's changing. I mean, when I was a little girl, I had this whole idea of how my life would go. I'd go to college, meet some preppy guy, we'd get married and have babies, the whole 9 yards. But today, standing there in that room, I just thought how different it's all been than I thought it would be, you know? First Dustin, and now this. It's just..." There were tears now, not just emotion. "It's so different than I expected." Lisa's voice had moved closer to Eve's. "You know I would fix this if I could." Eve sniffed hard. "I know, but there's nothing anybody can do. It just is what it is, and I've got to find a way to deal with that and keep moving. But sometimes it's so hard." "You know, I don't know if you know much about Ashley, Gabe's wife, but they went through this too. She had cancer years ago before they even met, and because of it, she can't have kids." Again Eve sniffed, but this one sounded surprised. "I never knew that." "They don't talk about it much, but she told me once how much it meant to her that Gabe would want to marry her even after he found out." The sniffing continued. "Did they ever think about adopting?" "I think they looked into it, but Ashley said her heart just wasn't in it at the time. That doesn't mean that they never will, but then she got into teaching, and I think that helps. She said the kids at school are like her own. She gives them the love she never got to give her own kids." "But it's not the same." "No, but that's just it. It never is. One person's experience is never the same as somebody else's. I think the point is to find a place you can give the love in your heart, and then you give it. If that's kids, great. If it's conventional, great. If not, then maybe God's got something else in mind." "I just feel so bad for AJ." Melody's heart snagged on the name, wondering what all this had to do with him. "AJ's a great guy, and when you guys find the path God's calling you to, you'll see just how great he is." The latch on the vacuum cleaner clicked, and Melody realized they'd probably heard it. Quickly, she pushed the little red thing into the kitchen. "All done." It took little to notice Eve wiping her eyes. It took everything to not react to it. "Well," Lisa said, getting back to work, "I think we're almost done in here, too. Looks like it's time to get going." AJ glanced over at Blaine, who had been trying to read without much luck for 30 minutes. Sunday afternoon traffic was pretty light for summer, and they were making good time. But no matter how hard he tried, His thoughts just wouldn't focus on macroeconomic theories. "Are you a business major?" AJ asked. "What?" Blaine's attention jerked up. Then he caught the look AJ angled at his book. Blaine raised his eyebrows skeptically. "Economics? No. Least favorite subject. It's a prerequisite." He went back to the book. "So, you're still in school then?" There was a jab to that question. "Yeah, I graduate in December, architectural design." Blaine bent his head to indicate he was reading, or trying to. However, that seemed to interest AJ. "No kidding? Like buildings and stuff?" "Yeah, but I'll only get to do the drafting part for now, not much actual designing." "Oh, why not?" "The money supply is tied to—" "Because it's only a 2-year degree. You've got to have at least 4 to really get to design much of anything." AJ lifted his chin in understanding. "So why don't you get the 4? Blaine exhaled hard. "Because at the rate I'm going, the 2 might kill me." Seeing he wasn't going to convince AJ to quit talking, he took a breath and closed the book on his arm to keep his place. "I've been in school 5 years now. Because of work and other things, I couldn't really go full-time." "Oh, what other things?" Carefully, AJ changed lanes. Life wrapped around Blaine's chest, choking the air out of him. "A lot of stuff. It just never really worked out for me to go full-time." AJ nodded. "So you're not going to be working at Harmon's after December then?" If Blaine didn't know better, he would have sworn AJ sounded hopeful about that. "Depends if I can find something else that pays and has benefits. Nothing's really set in stone yet." The sound of the tires on the pavement retook the conversation. After a minute, Blaine returned to his reading, but a thought went through him. He brushed it away and fought to concentrate. Scratching his head, he anchored his attention to the book, but it wasn't really working. One more futile attempt, and he gave up. He glanced across the seat, measuring the question. "Mind if I ask you something?" "What's that?" AJ barely glanced his direction. "Well, you've known Mel for a long time, a lot longer than I have, and I was just wondering if you'd ever— Well, has she ever talked about taking pills?" "Pills?" The panic was instant and intense. Blaine put up his hand. "No, I don't mean pills like drugs. I mean pills like diet pills." Why did he think this was a good idea? It wasn't. If he jumped out right now, maybe he wouldn't have to finish this conversation. Although he looked like he wasn't really paying attention, AJ shifted in his seat. "Diet pills? Why do you ask that?" Knowing it was fatal to continue, Blaine saw no other choice. "Well, that day we were out at the lake, I kind of found some in her purse. I know she's been dieting. There was that whole thing after the night she was with Bobby." AJ slammed his fist into the steering wheel. "Cripes! I knew it! I knew he'd done it to her again." Both confused and slightly afraid, Blaine stared at AJ. "Define again." The glance was barely that. AJ's eyes grew darker and darker with each passing thought. "When we were in high school, that jerk asked her out our junior year. I told her going out with him was a really bad idea, but she wouldn't listen. He was always hanging around making these disgusting comments to her about how fat she was and how she was lucky to have him because most guys didn't date cows. It was disgusting. I tried everything I knew to get her to see what a jerk he was. But it didn't matter what I said or what I did. She just thought he was so wonderful, and if she just lost weight, she'd have a real chance with him." The story faded, and Blaine fought with his heart not to jump to any horrible conclusions. "But she broke up with him, right?" "More like he broke her. When she was beaten down to the point she completely hated herself, he told her he'd never really liked her and started going out with Roxy Gallegos. Mel went into a real tailspin. She was sure he had ditched her because of the weight thing. She started throwing up and doing really unhealthy things to lose weight. She just kept saying, 'If I just lose 5 more pounds, then he'll take me back. I can't lose him. He's the only one who's ever loved me.' It was horrible." Ache for her broke over Blaine. He'd known, And yet, he'd had no idea. So this isn't a new thing? When AJ looked at him, the answer was clear. Slowly, AJ shook his head. I wish. Blaine considered that. He wondered how much, if anything, AJ had noticed about her recent descent into dieting hell. Then another question overtook that one. But why now? I mean, there's Bobby, but she hasn't seen him since April, and I'm pretty sure that was just a one-time thing. For the longest minute of his life, AJ said nothing. Then he glanced to the passenger seat. You're serious? Heat flooded Blaine's whole body. This was about as serious as it got. Yes, I'm serious. What's that supposed to mean? AJ snorted. It means I figured she was getting the same crap from you. From me? If Blaine could have cold-cocked the guy, he would have. Why in the world would I do something like that? There was contempt written all over AJ's face. Look at you. Money, cool, image-conscious. I'm sure every time she goes out with you, she's listening to you comparing her with all the hot girls you've bedded. Blaine's fury reached a whole new level. Now just where do you get off saying something like that? You don't know anything about me or my relationship with Mel. Well, I know you showed up at my house, falling all over her, and then half a week later, you were making out with some other hottie at the bar Houston. Blaine's anger fell into indignation, and then boomeranged back into full-out anger. That wasn't... It took everything in him to rein in the rage. For your information, Lana is a friend of mine. Yes, we used to go out. No, we are not going out anymore. She asked me out with a group of her friends. I went. I didn't know she was planning to throw herself at me. But you went out with another girl when you were seeing Melody. Yeah, I did. So sue me. We weren't serious or anything. The anger etched on AJ's face. You really don't get it, do you? Get what? That with Mel, it's always serious. She wants whatever guy she's with to be the one, and she's sure she's the problem in any relationship, even though she picks absolute jerks to go out with. Like you, I guess. It was a cheap shot, but Blaine was sick of getting beat up when it was AJ who had hurt her more than any other guy she'd ever been with. The shot hit its target square. Me? What about me? Oh, come on, AJ. Even you can't be that dumb. You've got to know she worships the ground you walk on. She was depressed for months when you got married, and getting married to Miss America probably didn't help her confidence in herself at all either. Did you ever think about that? But, AJ stumbled on the word. We weren't going together. We only dated like once. And? The late day sun dipped farther and farther as AJ searched for an answer. And I told her kissing her was like kissing my sister. With that, AJ let his head drop back against the headrest. Oh, no. He closed his eyes, which Blaine did not take as the smartest move considering the traffic. When he opened his eyes again, AJ shook his head. This was about me. Yeah, Blaine said softly. It was. He let the understanding drain into AJ. There were some things that didn't need to be explained. After minutes and minutes, AJ glanced at him. I feel like an idiot. Well, there's a start, but Blaine said nothing. Did she... The pieces were clicking into place. When she brought Bobby to the party... Yeah, it was to make you mad. A moment, and AJ glanced at him. And you? Yeah, Blaine said, hating the word. At first, but not anymore. The concern for her ripped through him, and his heart plunged with what she was doing to herself. I'm really worried about her, AJ. She hasn't been eating anything. I mean, like 3 bites of salad and some water. Her hair looks like seaweed, and I've seen her pull it out nearly by the fistful. She doesn't really talk about it, but I know she gets dizzy a lot, and Dylan's mentioned that she gets really bad headaches during the day. Have you asked her about it? Now AJ was concerned as well. Blaine hated this answer, but he had to be honest. No, I haven't. Why not? They were back to AJ being livid with a misstep by Blaine. Because I didn't know what to say. Blaine exhaled slowly. And I didn't know if it was my place to say anything. My track record with us hasn't been exactly stellar, and I didn't want to mess up again. AJ slid fingers through his hair and then turned left into Jeff and Lisa's new neighborhood. Well, we've got to say something. You know that, right? We or me? The question was barely there. Somebody. The silver SUV with its little trailer pulled in behind Jeff's pickup and loaded flatbed. AJ put it in park, and they watched Jeff get out ahead of them and stretch. He headed up to the garage and punched in a code, sending the garage door up on its track. I'm sorry about all of this, Blaine said, feeling the need to apologize for his part. Nah, man, it wasn't all your fault. I jumped to a lot of conclusions that weren't fair. AJ sat, watching Jeff, but not moving. Thanks for telling me about this. I don't know what to do about it yet, but at least we're on the same page now. Blaine nodded. I really am worried about her. Yeah, AJ said softly. So am I. This has been For Real, Book 3, The Courage Series, written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings.
Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel so you never miss a second of the story.